morning, good afternoon, good evening. And so wherever you are tuning in today, thank you so very much for being here in the penultimate day, the last session of the penultimate day at the RISE PECOWorld Summit 2026. And today we end the thematic of citizenship. We started the day with a talk about how alumni and student engagement is so important. And today we close with the topic of what are going to make our students and our alumni truly leaders of tomorrow. Because when we talk to anyone from academia, their first word that comes up everywhere is leadership, right? And that's a good thing, of course. We want our people to be good leaders, if nothing, to be good leaders of their lives, right? But to be leaders of tomorrow, you need to be citizens of today. And what makes them a citizen? What makes them future ready? Right? Today, most of the focus is on careers, placements, salaries, an economy first approach. And that really needs to change. In today's day, where we have constant problems that just refuse to go away, problems that have been around for centuries, and yet we've been unable to do much. Very recently, I saw someone who said that we are looking for water on Mars when we don't have enough water to give the people on Earth to drink. Clean water, healthy water. Isn't that something for us to think about? And so our students who are going to be decision makers of tomorrow, going to be product managers of tomorrow, going to be policy makers in some shape or form, how do we make them think holistically with an integrated lens that doesn't just look at economy, but realize that social, environment, and economy have to go hand in hand at every moment and not just some of the time. You know, when I started 17 years ago, I realized we don't even have a word to define thinking all these things in one go. The nearest we ever came to it is triple bottom line. And yet the triple bottom line is very clearly a financial and a commercial construct, which just brings in social value, but not completely focused on that. And so I coined this term socio-environnomic. And I know some people tell me that that's a bit of a tongue twister. But honestly, we have much, much more difficult words that I know I struggle with, right? So come on, do you think it's difficult? I would love everybody here to take a shot at it. Socio-environnomic. Does that sound very difficult? A thumbs up would be nice to let me know whether I'm right or wrong. Thank you. Thank you so much. But honestly, right? First, we don't have the language to help our students or help anyone to think of all three together. Even our visuals struggle with it. Often when you look at the way social, economic, and environmental is put together, it's like a Venn diagram with three circles. And the smallest part of those three circles is when you think of all three together, which is actually the reality of the world. Well, there are many other models to show these three aspects. You know, you have nested circle models. You even have a Mickey Mouse model, by the way. Yes, you do. You do. Go check it out. Okay. But none of them come anywhere close to saying that you have to think of all three all the time together. And that's a model that we have worked on. But we'll come to that during the course of the discussion, because right now I have with me some amazing people who are doing literally yeoman work to exactly solve this, to exactly take this message to every child they possibly can, to every adult learner they possibly can, and every decision maker in academia they possibly can, that this is a very important thing to do. And so please welcome my co-travelers on this journey who have really made it their mission in life to also make sure that we are not future blind, that we are actually going to be future ready, because intergenerational wealth is what we need to ensure in our world today. And that will only happen when we integrate social and environmental intelligence into the economy first thinking that we have. And so if I introduce them one by one, and we will then all be together, and then we will take this conversation further. So first off, I have with me the pleasure of Cheryl Kaiser, the creator of the Uncommon Table and founder of Breakthrough Interactions Group. I also have with us Shakti Sharan, the founder of Shaktify. Dr. Rabindra Henry, the director of UTX School at the Atlas University, who also, by the way, happened to be our academic partner this year. I also have Deborah Leipziger, the founding director and CEO of the Leipziger Group, but also a very, very accomplished author and a favorite poet of mine. Two other very special invitees are Neha Agarwal, a counseling psychologist who's a senior D&I consultant and an author herself. And finally, Rohit Kumar, the CEO of Apni Shala Foundation. I think all of them together bring a wealth of experience, wisdom, and above all, a passion to really do something that is exceptional for our students and for this coming world. And if I could just have all of them with me just now, I think we'll be ready to absolutely go. Great. Awesome. Getting lost. Where am I? Where is Neha? Here's she. Yes. Okay. All right. So there we are. I think, okay. Yeah. No, we did have Chinmay. This for a minute I was wondering, but Chinmay unfortunately had a medical emergency and so could not make it. But that's fine. I think we have a full house and we will take it from here. So to get started, I'm going to ask Cheryl to really start us off, because she's been very passionate about the SDGs in all her work at Babson College and many years of working in corporate social response. So academic corporate kind of lens. And I think all of us here have got this multi-dimensional lens and experience, which crosses over from, the industry as well as the academia, and also working with nonprofits. So it's really great to see that mix that will come out, I'm sure, in our conversation. So Cheryl, over to you.
Thank you. And it's such an honor and joy to see everybody and to be on this panel with some really amazing friends and amazing thought leaders. Thank you, Caron. And I think that we've been together since you started this
Yes.
I don't know, 12 plus years ago.
Yes.
And I couldn't be happier. So just to give you context, I started my career in this space. I tried to say social environment, or whatever, but it's very difficult. And I will leave the language to Deborah, who understands language, and I think she'll have something to say about this word. But I've been in this space for about 30 plus years. I spent a good part of my career as the managing director and then the executive director of the Boston College Center for Corporate Citizenship. And that primarily was a place that built the capacity of corporate executives in the early days to understand how to create strategies, language, a framework for embedding social environmental impacts into the business, and to make it not a sidebar, but to be absolutely integrated into the business. And that was a long time ago, and I think we did really good work. And then I had the opportunity to go to Babson College to start the Institute for Social Innovation. And why I loved it is when I was at Boston College, I used to stand up and say, gee, I wish that we could close the center because we should be teaching this to our MBAs and business students before they get to be inside of companies, so that we're remediating as opposed to creating and building a mindset of our students. And I used to jokingly say, at some point, I want to put the center out of business. Well, then when I got to Babson, I actually, the president said, do what you want to do. And I said, I want it completely focused on students and integrating it in real time. I didn't want theories. I didn't want frameworks. I wanted our students to work with leaders inside of companies that were struggling to do this. And I'm honored to say that Deborah and I co-wrote a book based on the class that we created. And this was some 16, 17 years ago. And everybody thought the class was on corporate social responsibility, but it really wasn't. It was when we brought leaders from companies inside, leaders who were the most senior people inside of major global companies, trying to push this ball up the hill, trying to integrate this. We brought them into the class and had our students design the line of inquiry. We said, look, we don't want you talking about programs. You can read about programs, but we want you to talk about what does it take as a leader, a courageous and entrepreneurial leader inside of companies, to really drive this into the business. And the students did a great job. And what was interesting to me was back then when I started at Babson, I could barely spell the word entrepreneurship, let alone really even understand what it was. And what was interesting to me, and I think to Deborah, is when we had all these leaders coming into the class, and the students asked them, not what did you do, but how did you do? And who are you? And how do you drive this kind of stuff? We learned some amazing things, that these leaders were not managerial administrative leaders. They were entrepreneurial leaders. They had a set of skills and competencies and attributes that were so, so different than a typical line manager or product manager. They had to be boundary spanners. They had to have great emotional intelligence. They had to be able to be strategic and visionary at the same time, and managerial. They had to be super communicators. And so while I could sit here and tell you that there are lots of frameworks that they used in what they did, what was most important that I just want to leave you with, and we'll have a conversation, but what's most important is that what I've learned after all these years is that, and Deborah and I were lucky enough, and I was fortunate enough to be at a symposium. And I think the takeaway is that all the thought leaders and all the amazing people that we've read and that have influenced us, we believe we did really good work. It just wasn't good enough. And I'm excited to talk today about what does good enough mean to move that needle. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Well, Cheryl, you never stop. Yeah, because you're always pushing the needle. So it's never going to be good enough, right? But thank you so much. Absolutely. I think your experience, as you said, on both sides, and just I think anyone who has the audacity to say, I want to shut down, has the passion to make it happen, right? I think that is what is required. And I'm going to go to Professor Henry, because he's again, actively in the academic community right now. And that's why I'd like to get his insight a little bit more before we kind of get into the part of the social and environment. So, Professor Henry, you again have moved from industry. You've been an industry leader, an industry decision maker, and now you're in academia, right? You are responsible for making your students, what you call it, career ready, employable ready, industry ready, all that. For you, what is industry ready, and how do you go about it?
Good evening, everyone. The basic point is by the time these undergraduate students graduate by 2030, the world would have moved into Industry 5.0, where we would have learned to work with machines. Humans have to work with machines. The last 35 years in the Indian context has been service industry, which is slowly waning out. So the placement scenario is turning upside down. Even if you want to be an entrepreneur without technological background, it will be very difficult by 2030 or later for a student to start a company, because more and more technology is being controlled by very few companies, especially in AI, in ML, in cybersecurity. And when we the environmental aspects, these companies are going to consume a lot of energy, like water, power, especially for the server farms. And this is the scenario our children who are graduating, say, by 2030 are going to enter. Also, we should consider the influence of cyber psychology. Basically, we have to look into how this younger generation is immersed in a virtual world, which they occupy more than 50% of their day-to-day life, and how that is impacting their real-life performances. So that also has to be considered. So because this is going to increase, it is not going to stop. We are not just social media, I mean addiction to AI tools, conversational tools, cognitive tools, and how they are going to navigate this environment by 2030. That is a very tough question to answer also. The third important point, the context of students graduating in 2030, is the geopolitical situation, especially in the context of OECD countries. Aging is a population decline, you would say. The birth rate is falling down. And that is one of the main motivating factor for implementing AI and automation. And AI's automation is going to deeply impact the workforce scenario across the world. It is not just going to impact one or two jobs. It is going to impact agriculture. It is going to impact manufacturing. It is going to impact supply chain and logistics. It is going to impact transportation. It is going to impact higher education, school education, and it is also going to impact your socio-economic factors, determining your livelihoods. And the entire world will be a different place from now in a decade. Our children are, this generation, especially Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they are entering a different kind of a world which we could not imagine 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So post-COVID is automated, artificial intelligence, machine bird world. And the fourth important factor is the environment. The companies which are ruling the world, starting, I don't want to take their names, but everybody knows about AI companies, software services, software products, manufacturing, and the technology that is being developed in China, the kind of automation that is going to interfere with our day-to-day life, the breakthroughs in the medical industry. So longevity is another factor. So all these factors has to be zeroed in when we want to prepare the students for the future. But beyond technology, beyond economic reasons, most important thing is, can you instill with them the wherewithal to bear the positive as well as the negative impact? The negative is going to be more on the, I would say, unfortunate side, because the world they are going to enter it will be, see, already the world economy is in chaos. The inflation has shot up like anything, and the war which is currently going on Middle East, Ukraine, Russia is impacting a lot. So the cost of living is going to impact. So the previous generation is going to take the load of the future generation that is going to be there. So the children are entering one of the most chaotic period in the world, because AI is not fun, right? AI is the most defining things in human history after the invention of electricity in the late 18th century. So it's going to have a heavy impact. So those people who are talking about AI bubble burst, it may be economically the bubble may burst in terms of the money flow, the stock exchange and everything, but the technology will never burst, right? You cannot remove technology from day-to-day life. So these are the major four factors that we have to prepare the students. Whether
Thank
you learn music, art, literature, everybody has to become a tech savvy, and only
yeah.
30% of the world population will be employed by 2040, because artificial general intelligence and artificial super intelligence will take over, and the creators will lead the world, and majority will be on, in my
You know,
simulation expectation, majority
it-
of us will be on universal basic income by 2035 or 40. So that is the world we are preparing our students for. Yeah.
So,
Thank
one of
you.
the things, thank you so very much. So, one of the things that I missed mentioning in my start is that the kind of flow that we do at the RISE PecoWorld Summit is that we cover challenges first, then we talk about the capabilities, and then finally collaboration. So, that's the way the flow of the roundtable is. And while I was, of course, waiting for the challenges to be spoken about, I didn't realize it would be this dire. I hope I really, really hope, because if I am getting scared listening to you, I can just imagine what students are feeling right now, when they are trying to think about their future. And that's why I'm going to call Neha into the conversation right now, that from a psychologist point of view, a person who counsels students and works with so many what you call it, career-based people. What is it that you feel is the situation like? Is it as bad as what, or as dire as what Professor Henry brings up, or is there some hope? And what is it that we need to worry about? Of course, we want to talk about the challenges, but yeah, I'd love to hear your words on that.
Thank you, Karen, and hello, everyone. Very delighted to be here and listen to Cheryl and Dr. Henry already. Before I open that, so today I came across one of the stories on my social media, where it said Franz Kafka says, "By believing passionately in something that does not yet exist, we create it. You have to be delusional for your own benefit." And I think with your question, like, I am perpetually hopeful. Like sometimes people say you're foolishly hopeful, and I love that, because how else do we? So there are always sides to look at it. I do think and agree with what Dr. Henry said, that the situation is dire, the context is changing so often. Like the generation gap is becoming like every 5 years maybe, and I have a teen daughter, and so I unlearn and learn all the time. So in my space, I see a lot of hope. I'm always a propagator, like being an engineer, having led organization cultures. I see the gaps in the education, but I think I have a lot of hope, especially with the young ones. It's just that how we see from our lens, how it was in our times, and we are not adapting enough. So I see a lot of hope in terms of, so even before that, like how I see is this, whatever topic we are talking about, social environment, and I've made career shifts to understand each of these, from engineering softwares to engineering lives, as I say, and being in CSR when India CSR mandate came. All of that, and they're so interlinked. So I loved your tongue twister, socio-environomic. I love it. It's not as big a tongue twister if we divide it, I think. But coming back to this, I think we have to, we have to more focus on helping these young people develop more of behaviors, habits, mindsets, the emotional capacities. And I see a lot of hope. If I have to talk purely from psychological lens, the younger ones coming to therapy, the younger ones questioning, they have inherent capacity of empathy. They might not have articulate empathy. They might not represent empathy the way we like to, but that does not take it away. So I think the focus should be on, there was in our time especially, like there was this saying on a lighter note that I was born intelligent, education ruined me. So the whole focus of children and young ones are born with, all of those natural inquisitiveness, curiosity. And I see that coming back with the more space that we are providing. Of course, there's a long gap to go when we talk about education, if I have to wear that lens. But from a psychology, behavioral lens, I think the problem is not about mindsets of students, but with the capacities that they are building to question, do we have the ecosystem, the leaders to answer that, to sit with that, to accept that this is where the change lies, and then work collaboratively towards it. So I see it more of that. I'm very hopeful with you'll hardly find me saying that, oh, this generation is going in ruts and, what do we do about it? There's no point discussing that. We are not them versus us or any of that. So I think for me, it's about how collaboratively we see the interconnectedness and education. So because I worked in organization and then I do unconscious bias training, we are trying to change the mindsets of adults. That is so much more difficult. So, the starting point of education, how we change the entire system, from the starting, rather than so much resources are being spent in organizations to then teach the adult mindsets, the whole change. So why don't we start, from the start? So I think, I'm very hopeful, Karen.
Yeah. No, I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that. But it's a real problem. What Dr. Henry spoke about, it's a real
Absolutely.
problem. And obviously you are seeing it in your practice, all the time. And I'm very tempted to go back to Cheryl because of her book, Creating Social Value. But Cheryl, I'll hold on to that for just a bit and instead ask Deborah to come in because she also has worked with you so much and a lot of similar kind of work that you'll have done. So, Deborah, when we talk about the work that you've done, again, with the United Nations, from being an author and a poet to actually being a consultant on projects that bring these kind of students together. What do you see as the big challenge in making them understand that shift, that you can't just be economy first, you've got to think about social and environment?
I think students and young people understand this. I think this next generation, I have 3 daughters that I joke are my triple bottom line. I think they understand and they can teach us. And so I think that the challenge is really to think about transformational change. I think the change that we've seen has been very slow, very incremental. And I've spent 30 years working with companies with the UN and was part of the development of some of the global architecture, including the Global Compact and GRI. And my focus now is around flourishing because I think flourishing is gaining a lot of ground. We see in a number of business schools at NYU has a Center for Purpose and Flourishing. Harvard has a Center for Flourishing. And I think there's also a movement around creating global flourishing goals. And I think flourishing encapsulates this idea of the I, the we, the all, and it's both it's socio-environmic, and I think it's about thinking in systems and patterns. And I love the RISE PECOWorld Summit. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I'm so glad you brought it back this year. And this is a chance that we get to learn how to be in community, how to co-create, and how to think in systems and in new ways. And one of the things I've spent the past 30 years doing is building curriculum for how can we teach this in colleges, in business schools. And a big piece of this is language. I think that we're really almost in kindergarten in terms of learning the language of systems, of what is socio-environmic, what is flourishing. And we have so many disciplines to learn from. It's important that we learn climate science. It's important that we learn about food sovereignty and these kinds of issues. And the last thing that I want to say about flourishing and is the concept of working at a broader level. Like I think we've been taught to think about a company, an enterprise, an organization, but in order to be the change, we need to think in much broader ways. And the RISE PECO Summit helps us to do that. But we need to think in terms of how we connect with cities, with bioregions. I think that is absolutely key. Most people don't know what bioregion they're part of, where their water comes from. And this is something that we get to change to really be the change that we want to see.
Absolutely. And Deborah, congratulations on yet another book on flourishing. More important is the lexicon of change. And that's why she can roll it off her tongue so well, because she has kept this word in that lexicon of change. And you know what the lexicon of change is really is about getting new language finding new language for all over the world. And not only in English, but even words that are not from English, right? And it's been an amazing effort that she has done. And now, of course, now her focus is on flourishing. But that in itself was an incredible initiative. I'm so happy that we had it at the RISE World Summit earlier, in the earlier editions, of course. And this year, of course,
Yes.
go own the change. Since you talk about systems, Deborah, I must call in a person who lives and breathes it every day. Yeah. And that is Shakti Sharan, whose firm called Shaktify is really about spreading systems thinking. Because as you rightly pointed out, it's so important, right? Without that, we really cannot even begin to bring all the three together. So if our aim is to have holistic thinking, integrated development, then being able to think in systems is absolutely key to that. And so, Shakti, may I please invite you to say a few words and let us know, what does Shaktify do and what do you do with that?
Yes, thank you, Kiran, and hi everyone. Pleasure to be here today. And Kiran, congratulations on another round of the RISE Summit. I have attended some of your sessions over the last few days. I found them very interesting, including one that you had on complexity. Yeah, so that was like very interesting. So to answer Kiran's question, I hail from the corporate sector. I spent over 3 decades in the corporate sector. I retired from IBM in 2017, and I transitioned to the social sector. So that was the key decision that I made in 2017, and I worked with a Washington D.C. Headquartered nonprofit called Pixera Global. I was with them for 5 years as a senior fellow, and then started Shaktify, a think tank which is to support change makers. Right. So one of the key challenges that I'm looking at Shaktify is on reimagining education. And I have with me today here another friend by the name of Vishwa Shah. He's also on the call, and he is also running an outfit called Reimagining Education. So education has been very central to Shaktify's work, and I have conducted very many webinars. And the key thing here that I want to say is that, look, our education today is is narrow and specialized, but things are changing. So I want to just firstly claw back to what Professor Henry said, and I feel, yeah, that is one possibility, the trajectory in which mankind is moving, and that we have more of AI and robotic systems. And I come from a tech background, so I know that that is a distinct possibility. But the other part of my existence and my life indicates that, look, that need not necessarily be the case. I think humanity is at a fork right now, and and humanity is also confused. So I don't think it's necessary that we go in the way in which the trajectory that Professor Henry, with all due respect to Professor Henry's, what he had to share. I think there's an equivalent, a movement that is happening which is not formal education. It is happening in ways in which it would be hard for people who come in from a very structured background to understand it. There's a whole lot of things happening at the grassroots. A whole idea of education is undergoing a change. It's not necessarily a paper chase. It doesn't have to be a paper chase. So and for me personally, education has meant more than just formal studies or getting a degree. It's a lot of learning that happens, which is even outside of books. So when we think, the curriculum that we are talking of, the curricula that we're talking of, bringing all three together, it does not necessarily have to be books. But when we speak of the word curricula, right, it is, we think naturally in terms of books. But there is a whole dimension of experiential education that we need to bring out. So there's a lot that's happening in education. And the one final thing that I want to say before I hand this back to you, Kiran, is that, see, I grew up in Mumbai and in India, and I went to Boston University for my MBA, and I found education to be so narrow, very, very narrow. And I think there has been a lot that's happened in this last decade or two to get us to move in an interdisciplinary environment. And I think the key to get us there is our ability to think in systems. That when we start thinking in systems, we very naturally progress beyond boundaries that have been established by a discipline, or to be able to think in cross-disciplinary terms. Systems thinking really helps us unlock that capability. So I've been a champion of systems thinking. It happened to me quite late in life, but I feel it's been better late than never. Yeah, so with that message, I'd like to hand this back to you, Kiran. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Shakti. I must share something with everybody here. We've been doing this for 13 years, right? This is the 13th year. And every time we set up the roundtable, everybody asks, what's the questions? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know, because it just is an organic conversation, right? Our job is to bring the right people together. And the way Cheryl would have put it is the uncommon table, because she is the original uncommon table, right? And our job is just to bring that table together. After that, it takes on and how seamlessly it goes. That Deborah spoke about systems, and then Shakti obviously was brought in to talk about systems. And just now, Shakti spoke about grassroots. And of course, I would want Rohit to talk about what he's doing and experiential education, right? Because it's not only about what's in the classroom, but what you get students to do outside the classroom as well, that will define the way they think and what kind of emotional intelligence and more kind of goes into play. So like I said, just gratitude that we follow this process that really is not about a Q&A, but really allow everybody to discuss and talk about what they feel is really important from their perspective and share their knowledge together and their wisdom, of course. So Rohit, may I ask you to please come in and share, how do you do value-based education, amazing work that you do? Please do share with us. Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for the invitation. And it was just, I was just in the awe of listening to all of you. I was like, oh, this is so cool. I just happened to be here. Like I said yes to Karen because she asked me to come, and I was like, oh, I'm learning so much. So really, really glad to be here. I think I'm gonna share an incident that happened a couple of years back, right? So Apni Shala, just to give you a little bit of context, I work with an organization called Apni Shala Foundation, and our work primarily is in Mumbai. We work with government schools on building school mental health and psychosocial development frameworks for schools, right? So working with schools to transition towards well-being aligned schools is what we are trying to do. And couple of years back, we had a borrowed framework. We were using KSEL framework, collaborative of academic and social emotional learning, US-based framework. We were finding it a little bit of kind of tension with the framework. It's a lovely framework, talks about the 5 competencies of self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision making, and so on. And we were talking about friendships in the larger landscape of social emotion, social awareness and self-awareness, right, with the kids. A grade 6 child asked the facilitator that I'll say this in Indian and then I'll translate. The child said, so the facilitator asked, can you write down some of the at least 2 friends that you have that you really love and adore, just to kind of for us to start thinking who are our clubs of life or systems of support, right? The child was waited and said that, Didi, can I write? क्या कुत्ता मेरा दोस्त हो सकता है? Can a dog be my friend? Right? Then another child asked, दीदी फिर क्या एक मेरे घर के पास पेड़ है, क्या वो पेड़ मेरा दोस्त हो सकता है? Can a tree be my friend? Right? That input, the facilitator came back, spoke to us. The entire competency of social awareness we had to redefine, because in our head, when we were looking at from the American Western individual lens, people are friends. We don't see trees and the dogs as friends, right? And that landscape changed for us. Now, Apni Shala, we kind of restructured the entire understanding. So while we can frameworkize education, but ultimately it comes down to what is the young people really asking. And frankly, what I'm learning, Karen, in this work, I've been in education for last 16 years. Before that, I was working with TCS, so I was volunteering sometimes. So having a systems lens was my entry. I was trained as an engineer, right? I think we have to decolonize education, because the colonization of education is what Shakti you were talking about. That the problem of education is not that all education is seeing the world as individualistic or capitalistic lens. It's the colonized education, the landscapes that got colonized, is making us see it in that way. If you look at, for example, in America, if you look at the indigenous communities, they already thought in systems. They already thought in the trees and the waters and the fires and the landscapes. Like the same thing happens in India. The tribal communities have that indigenous knowledge that they bring. So this child asking ki kya a tree can be my friend is that pushback. Now we can talk about systems thinking as much as we want, but tomorrow if I realize that a capitalist company is actually polluting the river in my backyard, will I be able to stand up to that? Will I have the systems to support to fight against that company? Right? So we can't talk about systems in the isolation of discourses around power, right? Who has power? How are we navigating power? And how is power getting redistributed and relocated? So when we work in schools, the discourse around power becomes very critical. In a classroom setting, who has power? Who is driving the classroom conversation? Is the teacher? Is it those bunch of students who are always raising their hand? Is it a bunch of students who have certain kind of voice, right? So in psychosocial development, I think when we look at the landscape of this work, my understanding is that if we start tapping into some of these other sources of knowledge, other ways of educations that already exist. It is not something nowadays, this whole Western capitalistic mindset, "Cha, abhi ye problem hai, we are going to solve it," right? Solutions existed. We ignored them, right? Royally ignored them, right? We actually looted those solutions. So everything doesn't have to come into a framework format. Because when we start listening to each other as human beings, right, that's where solutions start emerging. Do we have to have a name? Not really. Do we give the credit to that child for pushing back our thinking about what is social awareness competency? No, not. But now we can have to name that this whole understanding of psychosocial development is emergent for us, from facilitators, from students, from families, from caregivers. So when in the school, the work has to be that how do we really shape the understanding of schools? Whether we do it or not, young people are doing it. I love Gen Z for that reason. They push us left, right, and center and kind of make our life sense, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, millennials did the same thing to their generation before that, right? My parents, I am saying the same thing that my dad said, and now I find it hilarious, right? I think, why is this generation like this? My dad said the same thing. So I think also giving due credit to young people that they will take care of the world. That while the problems exist, challenges exist, how are we looking at young people as partners in this co-creation of the world, or are we looking at कि हम उनके लिए problem solve कर देंगे, right? I think that lens has to shift, and there is so much of joy when we start working with them, right? When you listen to them, oh my goodness, and they actually want to do stuff. ऐसा नहीं है कि they only want to talk, right? They are taking actions in the school, like in the communities, in the conversations. So I think that shift in how we think education, not as a service, not as a, okay, I'm going to teach you lens, renegotiate power, redistribute power to all people who are in the room. And I think we have frameworks for that. Start leaning into that framework. I'll pause here, Karen, and pass it back.
Thank you so much, Rohit. Absolutely. And the kids are amazing when they start realizing that they have the power to shape what is being discussed and change what is being actually handed over to them and told, use this. And they say like, no, but I got a different way to look at it, And when they discover that power, it can really lead to so much more, right? So thank you. So Deborah, you had your hand up. Go ahead. What would you like to add to this?
Well, I just love the story about can a dog be my friend? Can a tree be my friend? I think that is flourishing. To me, that is exactly what we're talking about. When we talk about flourishing, it's not just about people and organizations, but it's about the non-human world, all of us together. So I love that. And I'm glad that you brought up the question of power, because I think that's really important. And I think one of the areas that there's a lot of work to do is in the area of governance. This is something that I'm focusing on a lot in this new book that I'm writing, not just of AI, but also of how we think about nature. And so one of the, I think, very exciting new trends is looking at the rights of nature and how nature is represented in boardrooms. And so we have the beginning of a trend of companies having a seat on the board for nature. And so we're seeing this in a number of companies, and I think it's very exciting. And around the world, and here it's being led, by Latin America and other places where rivers begin to have rights. And it's not just a people-centered world, but we are giving rights to nature, and I think that's really important. And the piece about decolonizing education, I think, is crucial. And this is part of what the lexicon of change is doing, is integrating also indigenous terms and terms from many languages, because encoded in language is a lot of wisdom and ways of thinking about the world. And English is very, very limited. In English, things, we have a lot of things, commodities, whereas in indigenous languages we have systems, we have processes. It's not, water is not a thing, it's a cycle. And so I think the language piece is so important to hold and store knowledge and systems and relationships.
Great. Thank you, Deborah. I think Shakti put a comment it's called Earth Democracy. Would you like to expand on that, Shakti? You're on mute.
Yeah, so it just struck me whilst Deborah was speaking that I had attended a session by Vandana Shiva and her team at Navdanya. Navdanya is in the north of India and Dehradun at the foothill of the Himalayas. And it was a program on Gandhi globalization and earth democracy. And it just brought back memories of what you said, Deborah, that even nature has rights, and we need to build that into our ethos. We need to build that into our way of life. So it was just, in support of what Deborah mentioned, that, yeah, is very, very relevant. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Deborah.
Thanks. Yeah. So, we're going to move now to the capabilities. And one of the things that I'd like to point out is, Atlas University is our partner, is our academic partner this year. And one of the things they do is they also help us with volunteers. So their faculty get involved in our programming. They are our knowledge partners, and students are volunteering. And that's one way of, kind of getting them to understand the value of giving back, the value of getting integrated in work that is beyond just, the, what you call it, the typical commercial work that you would look at doing, or the typical commercial projects. And so, Dr. Henry, maybe you can speak to that what are some of the kind of programs that are done so that we encourage students to think more in social and environmental terms beyond their classrooms.
Beyond classrooms, like Mr. Shakti talked about experiential learning, right?
Yes.
So learning by doing is the mantra as of today. Because the traditional higher education, because I deal with 18 and above, so the higher education system is undergoing a rapid change across the world. Some have understood and some are doing it. So a student, but meaning because you cannot separate technology from anybody's life as of today. Even to save the environment, we need technology. So that is the cusp we are standing today, right? And the second important thing I thought, because I deal with 18 to 25 maximum, the age group, what I felt during my interaction with students, postgraduate, PhD, or bachelors, um, they are very good with the technology world, but they are not able to relate to the human side of interacting with the rest of the population or even with nature as such. Because they are born and brought up, especially the later generation. I'm not blaming them, but that's the way the world is progressing. So we have to prepare them for that kind of a world, to observe shocks as well as success together, failures and success. They have to learn to treat both of them together, because many of them break down if they don't get a package or if they're not able to go with the peers. So that kind of psychological counseling is there. And the psychological counseling that we have today are literally outdated, because they don't consider the influence of the digital world on a human being. So what we call technically, scientifically, digital psychology. So digital psychology, or what we call cyber psychology, is not part of any of the counseling in any higher education institutions across the world. So we are only treating them for the real behavior we are seeing, but we are not counseling them for the behavior in the virtual, because how we live till last 40 years doesn't matter. It is for the future. It is for the children. It is for the, they have to run the world. So are we preparing them for that? So that is also related to what we learn, right? And second, the number of disciplines, like Mr. Sakti and others have talked about, the number of disciplines are very great, but they are also becoming multidisciplinary. It is not that this is, see, you have to put it in like this. Industry 4.0 is coming to a closure. It is already closed by 2025. 2025 is the starting state of Industry 5.0. Whatever you talk about environment, being respectful to the people, the human being, self-realization, access to power, the world will, of 8 billion is going to nosedive in population. It will reach around 7 billion another decade, because India will peak around 1.6 billion by around 2050 or 2060. So the population decline in China is also to be, we have to talk at the world stage, not specific groups. So around the world, the democracy is also weakening because of technology. Technology plays an important role. So you cannot take away technology at any cost. And because technology can be made and broken by even an individual. We don't need a team of people to create technology. A guy can sit in a room, break open his laptop and create something new. The way the AI and automation, the way the companies and the governments are fighting for control of technology is going to shape the life of the future. And environment, like we said, like many of the alpha male leaders across the world have a very superficial regard to environmental education as part of the curriculum. They have it for namesake, right? So they don't realize it, because the resources on the earth are being consumed by large corporations, which cannot be, and even if the whole world comes together, we don't have the capability, not the power to fight against such big, large corporates who fund the political parties, who in return run the government, and who in return control the resources. And they are able to convince the local populations where they draw water or minerals. For example, you can see the whole chaos happening in Africa and South America is for the rare earth metal between two group of countries, right? Two powers which are fighting for rare earth. So, and another thing we have to do not underestimate the power of technology at any cost, any cost.
Yeah.
So don't remove from any of the discussions. And the way at which it is rapidly growing, like yesterday, NVIDIA discussed about the new processor where your laptop will become like a small cloud. So you can do many of the things virtually. We don't need even more of the rooms, right? So employment is a question mark. Please do not think that I'm talking negative, but if you don't accept you have a disease, you cannot find a solution, right? It's not
Very
me, it is the children who are going to find a solution. As a teachers, a professor, it's our duty to make them capable of fighting the world. The method doesn't
abs-
matter. The
yeah.
process doesn't matter. Whether you go to school, do not go to school, you go to university system, do not go to university system. Are we providing the capabilities to work in a technology
Right.
controlled world? No,
Absolutely.
there is no, there is nothing as personal security or information security in technology world.
Yeah.
People who come from traditional software industry, service industry in India, do not understand it because they do not create the technology. You didn't invent the semiconductor, you didn't create the platforms. It's
So
done
true.
by the Western universities and Western labs from their thought process and what they have. So
Sure.
it is all about bringing these two worlds together, and the human beings will survive. They may
Yeah.
even reach the planets in another 20 years. China is planning to land by 2033. So there will be heavy competition for that also, the resources on Moon and Mars. And
Yeah.
it is not easy to because that's why even NASA is now increasing their investment into Artemis program, and they are
Yeah.
giving a time which is unachievable by 2028. So there will be a lot of population which, and you have to understand, see, without technology, human species could not progress, starting from Stone Age, Bronze Age. So never underestimate the power of technology. Technology is
Definitely.
here,
Thank
and
you.
you
Thank
have
you.
how to integrate technology. That's the crux of it.
That
Thank
is it.
you.
Thank you so very much. So you mentioned the global stage. So I think, Cheryl, I'll come back to you on that. Your book, Creating Social Value, a guide for leaders and change makers, was amazing when it came out. It was really a pioneering kind of thought at that time. Business leaders never really thought about that, right? Creating that social value. So from there to then, of course, your contribution to the evolving entrepreneurial education, innovation in the classroom. I mean, when you talk of how do you bridge that, right, from the classroom to the global stage, what is happening at the global stage? And as Professor Henry said, because it's shifting so rapidly thanks to technological changes, what do you think, where does social value come in all of this? How do you really start even bringing in social value in such a kind of dynamic environment?
Wow, this has been a great conversation. I'm learning a lot. So thank you all. How do I see it? Well, I think it's a combination of what we've all said. I First of all, what has changed over the years is learning by doing, experiential education. And the way that my belief, my theory of change when I was teaching was that I didn't want people to just read a book and study it to do it. I wanted them to actually go inside of global companies and understand, like any good systems thinker or design thinker, go in and understand what was going on. So I don't think it's, I call what we've done over the years. Well, let me step back. So I had to define social innovation at Babson. So for those of you who don't know, I was at Babson for 16 years, and it's only a business school. So it's not a university with multiple disciplines. It's just a business school. And to have started an Institute of Social Innovation for global companies, family businesses, I needed to make it relevant. So we defined social innovation as relational. We basically said social innovation is not an outcome. Social innovation is the practice of co-creating with both usual and unusual suspects in service to better outcomes for business and society. It's highly relational. It's the relationship between the individual and themselves, the individual and their society and community, the individual and the built environment, the individual and the natural environment, and the technology environment. It is all about relationships. And so to what Dr. Henry said, yes, our relationship as humans to technology is here. It's not going away. But I do believe that I go back to the simplest entrepreneurial mindset about how to affect this globally, is that we actually have to start with understanding who we're trying to change. And that's where change always happens. And to Deborah's point, all change starts with language. So changing language is really important. But we've been really able to really help companies globally when their students bring social and environmental thinking to the table, which they hadn't before. And they experiment. So you're going to hear from me that I'm going to embed everything in sort of the entrepreneurial mindset. What we've done with students and companies is we've said, look, we don't have an answer, but we're going to teach you an entrepreneurial mindset so you can experiment and try it. And see if it works. And I was very fortunate for the last 2 years to work inside of a huge global company. And they really wanted to embed social innovation as a culture. And they were, so we were brought in by the corporate social responsibility team, but we worked with 12 business units, people with bottom line responsibility. And for 2 years, we experimented and taught them the entrepreneurial mindset and design thinking and systems thinking, and said, okay, here's what your product is. Is it conceivable that there is a social and environmental impact that you can make with this product. And they had never thought about that. And so I would say that experimenting and not coming in and saying, this is the way to do it, allowing people to learn by doing. And all of a sudden, after 2 years, every single one of those business people said, wow, I now have a different way to think about it, because for a year they were acting differently. And so when they left, and a few of them had been, this company did go through layoffs, one of the greatest compliments was when the business unit person said, you've sort of let the genie out of the bottle. I don't think I'll ever think about product design without thinking about the environment, or thinking about my customer and what they think of the environment or society. So I think it's, my one hope is that people go in not with an answer, but with an open mind of an optimistic point of view, and with tools to teach people how to experiment and fail and take risks on the things that matter the absolute most.
Great. And talking about experimentation, I'm going to ask Vishwa to join us because he's been experimenting sitting over there. Yeah. But before Vishwa, you kind of come in, I'm just going to touch on one point that Cheryl spoke about, that, everything has to emerge. I think today the days of prescriptive approaches is completely gone, while systems thinking has always been around for very, very long. In fact, it's really only just now that people are waking up to really how powerful it is. However, okay, I always say this all the time, that in a system, on paper, systems thinking has solved every problem. Right? Every problem. We know exactly what are the levers that need to be looked at. We know exactly what needs to be done, why there is a problem, what are the interlinkages. So on paper, it exists. But how do you get it done? And that speaks to Rohit's power dynamics. Also, it also speaks to what Cheryl, you just said. Who is in it? Right? If we don't understand who's in a system, you're never going to be able to manage to move those levers, right? Because it's finally someone who's going to do it. Just like Dr. Henry also spoke about technology, ultimately it is people who are going to manage it. And so if we understand who is in it, and that's why for me, systems thinking, I mean, the part of systems thinking that I am very, very, gung-ho about is really systems ownership. Because when we co-own and understand we co-own the system, then we are willing to think about others first, or may not be first, but at least we need to think about others as well whenever we are doing anything. And that speaks to what you just said, Cheryl, that talking about product design, design thinking, whenever you're doing that, bringing in both the social and the environment becomes important. And that's how you reach social innovation, right? So thank you for absolutely. Yes, please.
And I just wanted to add one other thing, as because we were all talking also about nature and our students understanding that. I have been designing curriculum in nature and not as a bolt-on. I actually teach the course in nature. So the content is delivered in nature and it actually gets metabolized differently. I don't have to talk about trees and birds and water if I'm teaching in nature, and ask them to observe what's around them, observe what it means to be to be a mistake, to be, to see risk, to see anything. If you do it in the environment in which you want people to be aligned with, they actually metabolize it individually and differently. So I encourage people, if you're going to try to connect nature to curriculum, don't do it in the classroom. Get outside the classroom and sit outside of nature and see and use that as your actual content.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. So Vishwa, you've been busy drawing and sketching and talking about bird's eye view and eagle's eye view. So feather view. Come on, let's hear what's your view.
I was just thinking about a story that a man told me. I'd gone to a small gathering of about 2,000 organic farmers. I'd gone there 7 days earlier because I was really sad in my heart, about the conditions of the world. Couldn't see any further than 2 feet ahead of myself, how to do it right. But then I reached this place and I just was lugging things from one place to another, just helping prop up the whole event. And slowly just giving yourself to something completely. Somewhere along the line, I'm not going to finish the whole story, but it was just after that event, something sparked in me when you see that level of solidarity or that level of foolhardiness in many people, which I see over here. That people who are observing a lot of things that I'm observing, who understand the same things that I'm looking at and trying to address from their own situations. But there this story comes. There was an elder, and he was talking about taking people to a small trip for across Tamil Nadu for procurement, foreigners coming to India. And he had this trick that he would serve them food extra hot with extra salt. Because the food is always going to be delayed. But when it's extra hot and extra salt, everyone just likes it. And the second thing is that he always ends the day's ride at a waterfall. And that changes everything. You just remember the best parts. So that's my 2 cents to the contrary.
I think nature makes you think differently. And I think that's really, I would take that from your story at the end of the day, right?
I would say it's not about thinking. You have to let go thinking. That's when that thing actually happens.
Right, right. Absolutely. Yes, I guess that's also true. Let go of thinking. You sometimes have to unlearn and, just let it be. That's it. Don't think it through too much. So great. So Rohit, you put something in the chat box. Tell us how would you like to say more on that?
No, I was just thinking, like, thank you, Vishwa, for naming that. This idea of thinking has become such a dominant idea of education, right? And there's a reason for that. We wanted to kind of have certain type, it served certain purpose in a certain time of history. And when we let go of thinking and start thinking about what is the role of feeling, how do we understand feeling? What is the role of observing? What is the role of, some of these processes kind of, intermingling with each other? Or what if thoughts come later than how the sensations that come into our body? What is the wisdom of the body, right? We don't, Karen, I mean, I'm like in last 15 years or so, when I started doing this work, right? I have been learning about this while I'm doing this work.
Absolutely.
In my school, I never knew there's something called wisdom of the body, right? No one would really pay attention to अगर मैं बोलूं कि मेरा पेट दुख रहा है. If I say my peट is hurting, my stomach is hurting, right? What is it telling me? ऐसा कुछ conversation नहीं था, right? I mean, that's never is a conversation. Now, luckily, now some of these things are coming into discourse, which is great. But and ऐसा नहीं है कि नया conversation. Many of these were existing conversations, as I was speaking earlier as well, in alternate forms of education, but dominant forms of education took away something. So, like, just like this, also thinking aloud with you, as I mean, when we are looking at this, is really a tension between what kind of world we are in. While we are saying that we are pursuing for freedom, we are individuality and thinking, and then we kind of offload that work to AI, right? Whatever the internet says becomes the hard truth, without having to investigate what is really true, right? So while we are, I mean, I will fight with my boss for my independence and freedom, and I will not take orders from you. I'll do my own thinking, but then I'll go and let AI do my thinking, right? So how do we and it's very interesting. Like I see that young people doing it, and I'm just curious, how do we navigate this? I don't have an answer to that, but it's an interesting landscape for us to be in as educators, because that's what young people are coming into. So information passing is no more education. They will tell you on your face, like, they know it.
Yeah.
Then what is the role of education? And that's where I think what Vishwa said, that can schools really create space for us to feel? Then we will have to think about schools differently, right? Then the buildings cannot be schools. Then we will have to go into nature. And right now, the kind of urbanization that's happening across the globe, right? We are becoming cities. And you look at Indian cities, right? All of us are crumbling literally. So how do we really relate with nature? How do we feel in one with nature? Only during vacations, when we go to, like, let's say Kohima or someplace else? And I think that is something that has to be thought about, that we have lost the ability to really feel what needs to be felt in our mind and body. And I think I think some of this is very, very uh, simple to understand, but very difficult to implement, like the ability to pause.
Right.
How do we really pause? The ability to give wise attention to something. Right now, we are so attention deficit, and
Right.
every system around us is just snatching our attention away. What is my capacity to pay attention to? Like in this call itself, right? I can't be here for 2 hours. Like something is coming my way, right? I switched off my video so many times because I have to kind of pay attention to so many things.
Right.
And I was thinking, what's going on? Right? I said this is powerful conversation, but I also have to attend to the dinner, right? So how do
True.
you think about these things?
Right.
And are our adults in the institutions of education equipped to do this?
Yeah.
How we will not be able to create systems if we don't know how to do it, right?
That's true.
And I
Right.
think that's the work, like, for example, in Apni Shala, a lot of work goes into personal and professional development of people, right? So we invest almost 20 to 25% of the working time in just doing this. Like, every year we have to go through mindfulness training ourselves, and year by year, because it is not
Amazing.
one-time thing, right? So
Amazing.
how are we structuring? What is teachers' well-being? Have we been thinking about that? When we are thinking about young people, how often the conversation is about the adult educator who is spending their life? Like in US, teachers are just resigning and going to they would prefer to do a bartending than teaching in a US public school, right? I don't want to be killed in mass shooting. I just don't want to. Why should anyone be, right? In India, there are classrooms which have like 60 to 70 students in one classroom, right? How will a teacher humanly teach, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we are letting the public systems crumble, and we are thinking that private solutions will solve for it, right? So we
Yeah.
say that acha, IB schools sell off or close off all the government schools. That no private solution can address a public problem, right? So we
Very.
have to look at the solutioning in a public way.
Yeah.
And to
Sure.
think in a public way, we will have to engage with politicians. We will have to engage with IS officers, right? No corporation can solve for this. No, educational institution can solve for it because they can only theorize these things.
Right. So, Rohit, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to come in because we are
No
coming to
problem.
the end of our timeline. Like you said, attention deficit. So, I don't want to take more time than I really have to. But, I just want to quickly say that, yes, what you said about, thinking, the types of thinking and all. While, yes, we do need it, that's the reason why I've called it the C curriculum. Okay. Because for us, it is really beyond just before you can think, can you feel it? Can you see it? Right? Can you really imagine it, right? So when you do that, then you can reflect on it and do all your thinking around it. Makes a lot of sense. So that's why we have made that the cornerstone of the Koru toolkit, which is the basis of what we are working on in terms of models and framework around changing curriculum, as well as obviously working with corporates. But we'll come to that because Deborah's been having a hand up, so I'm going to let her come in. But I do want to warn you all, yeah, we are running out of time, and otherwise we'll have to stay a little longer, and your dinner will have to wait. Rohit, I'm saying that to you. Okay, Deborah, over to you.
This is just such a gift to be with everyone here today. But I wanted to come back to what Rohit was saying because I think, Rohit, that there's so much room here for art and creative work in helping students and young people, all of us, to experience our own emotions, our own connections to nature and each other. And so, I say this as a poet, but also I think being able to express artistically and creatively, whatever that means, music, painting, poetry is so essential. And I think a lot of what is happening in climate change, we can only really understand if we experience it in other ways. So there's science as a way of knowing, and then there's our own intuition and experience. And I think it's very important to teach and give room for creative expression in young people, for all of us.
Great. And I think creative expression is so critical. People don't tend to think of it. I mean, I say this all the time that we expect engineers, and ironically, we've got engineers sitting right here in this table, right? So many of us are engineers, and all of us are now moving and doing social, or we are doing, beyond technical stuff. Let's put it that way, right? So I think, somewhere we feel that those who are engineers, they are the ones who get the 100%, the 90%, the 95s, and then the rest of them are expected to do arts and psychology and all of that. It really should be the other way around. Because look at what is the result of it. Yeah, scientists and engineers have been able to create the biggest bombs of all that can create war, okay? But we still haven't been able to crack the sense of dialogue that can diffuse that war. How sad is that? What does that tell you? Right? Which means we need to get to work on the other side. That is what is more important. That is what's going to save the world, not the other way around. Right? So I think, yes, we definitely need a lot more creative. We need a lot more feeling. We need a lot more seeing that needs to come, and keep the thinking aside sometimes for just a bit. Yeah. Shakti, yes, please come in.
Yeah, thank you, Kiran. I'll just take a minute or two to present some closing thoughts. So the question that you asked in the beginning of this round was, what are the capabilities needed for what? And the question, and it goes, and that answer is basically the theme of this, the session today, of how do we embed social and environmental intelligence into, an economy first curriculum, right? So I think we cannot approach this in a linear fashion. It has to be, we can't be to solve this. So there were three things that came to my mind. I think first is the whole power of storytelling. So, and I think Cheryl also raised a very important question: whom are we trying to change? Yeah, what is this, the question that she posed? And I would answer that by saying that I've been first trying to change myself. I'm not so concerned about the world. I'm concerned about changing myself, and it begins with me. And and then everything spreads from me as the epicenter. Yeah. So the first thing that I would just say is from a capability standpoint is the capability to storytell. Yeah, it's getting considerable significance right now, and this is the way in which we can, shape opinion. That's how we're going to have to make it work. That's number one. The second is paying a lot of emphasis to emotional quotient and EQ and emotional intelligence, building up our emotional intelligence. Critical self-reflection is just really very crucial right now. And the third thing I want to just share with you is that, I did a certification in systems thinking from Cornell, the professors Derek and Laura Cabrera. And what I found very fascinating about them was this whole thing about developing metacognition. So metacognition is your ability to understand your whole your cognitive process, which then connects the inner world and the outer world. It helps you in understanding the interconnections, the patterns between various phenomena, things, people, whatever. Also your ability to make distinctions and also introduce perspectivist thinking. Yeah, so these were just some of the thoughts that I had that I wanted to share with you and the team, because I don't think it's an easy task to just make that shift. But having said this, there are colleges. There's Bard College in New York, which offers a green MBA. So that's a shining example. There's the ESCP Business School in Paris that has as one of its pillars humanist values, and the other one is sustainability. So changes are happening. How can we amplify it? And I feel it has to be addressed in a non-linear way. Yeah. Thank you, Kiran.
Thank you for reminding me. So I'm also part of a university for Malaysia, Unitar University, which actually is completely online. Completely. I don't know of anyone else that is completely online, right? So it's amazing. It was started exactly with that, because they focus on sustainability, and they said we cannot call ourselves sustainable if we ourselves have a huge, footprint. And so they actually are running an entire university online. So yes, I think the winds of change are there. Yes, there are some of them which are, forces that can be negative, that can be frightening, that can be really cause for worry. But at the same time, there's a lot of good that is also happening. People are changing. People are being more sensitive about this and recognizing that there is a need to change. And that's why like we said this year, we have pivoted to say that it's not anymore only about conversations. Yes, we need dialogue and we need conversations, but you need to continue post that. And that post that is the coalition. How do we bring together people who really care, people who really want to change things, people who want to make sure that the future is bright, right? People want to make sure that humanity continues in its current avatar, and better if possible, but definitely not go back to things that might be completely out of control for us to do. So, with that, I mean, I would only encourage everybody to please check out the PecoWorld. It is meant for collaboration. There are multiple spaces that we have created. There is no duplication. You can take the same WhatsApp group that Shakti, you are suggesting that Vishwa connects with. That WhatsApp group link can be on the platform. So you don't duplicate anything that is off. You do not even duplicate your online community. Any online community, any WhatsApp group, any physical community you have, you just have to give a way for people to connect with you. That is the important point, right? And then you can create your so the idea is that you first create a registry of people who are interested in similar things. The second is you create a repository, because WhatsApp doesn't allow you to keep track of anything, right? You get buried under messages in no time at all. So this becomes a nice repository of events and everything, which you don't do it like a G drive, much more simpler. And when you go onto it, you'll get that understanding. And last but not the least, we don't want it to stop at just communities and conversations, but how do you get into action? So projects, there are Pico circles that you will have, and you'll see it on the screensaver behind me, where we say building Pico circles that will change the world. So we want action on the ground. So anyone who has a project to share with others, to be a part of, and bring more collaborators into your work, this is the platform that we have created. And hopefully it has been 17 years of insights and working and fine-tuning both of our models and frameworks, as well as our own experiences, to be able to bring that to fruition now. And I hope that, I will invite all of you to please do look at it, and let's see how can we work together so that next RISE World Summit, the 14th RISE World Summit, will actually be able to showcase the impact of what we are talking about today. Because after all, it's not about dialogue anymore. Coalitions are the solution. Yeah. So thank you all once again very much. I know it's very late here in India, and we need to let all of you go. But thank you. Tomorrow is the final day, and we will be having the closing plenary and the RISE Awards. And this year, the RISE awardees are some amazing, amazing people, as always, of course, but very special, because they really have proven the whole concept of what we are talking right through these 4 days. So do join us tomorrow. Our guest of honors also are some amazing women. So please do join us and check it out. The last thing I want to say is, Shakti spoke about it starts with me. Absolutely. And Deborah spoke about ours, and the all and the we. Tomorrow, the theme for tomorrow is ownership. Okay. And the very first roundtable, because we have the Beyond series for the first roundtable, is Beyond Me to Ours. Whose planet is it anyway? Right? I think it's a thought for all of us to really think about, because it's not just our planet. It is the children who are going to come, the future generation who come. It's their planet as well. We are just living. I mean, as the saying goes, right? The African saying goes, we've just borrowed the earth from our future generations. So I think with that, I'm going to really close and say that please do join us, and thank you so much once again, all of you, for the incredible knowledge, experience, and wisdom that was shared, because I think with all of this, each one of us right here and those who will view the video later on will definitely benefit for years to come. Thank you so very much. Bye-bye.
Right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good night to everyone.
Good.